Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it is the CEO series where we bring together the most phenomenal leaders, global leaders, and we talk to them about their careers. And our guest today, um, this is really special for me because we have Lia De Feo, an advocate, former corporate innovator who spans multiple industries, experience in working at companies like Food Network, Martha Stewart, and Getty Images. She has consistently pushed boundaries and championed innovation. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, CNN, refinery.com, and her new article is just out at the Washington Post, and we'll talk through that. She has spoken at the New York State Assembly in support of legalization of surrogacy and working with resolve.org to advance reproductive justice. She has a book coming out that she's working on. It's just amazing. I have the easiest job in the world to talk to phenomenal people, and it's just exciting for me to have you as a former co-worker for Martha Stewart Living. So, Lia, hey, how are you?
It is a joy and an honor to be here, Ron. Thank you. Thank you. We're both in different parts of the world, and here we are together. I love it.
Yes, but I've always been a big fan. I've always followed you, and when we
Thank
were working
you.
together, I said, "Oh, she's very sharp." That's a follow this, and everything worked out, so to speak. So we always like to start the show in talking about what was the journey? What did the journey look like for you when you started from, say, university? You started your first. You mentioned your first real job was at Martha Stewart, and to where you are today. So kind of give us a snapshot of that.
Yeah, so for me, Ron, it's been kind of trying to find that sweet spot between business and creative.
Mhm.
That's been a big theme throughout my career because I find myself as somebody that's very business minded, but also if I don't have some element of creativity in my job, then I'm really not as satisfied. And I think to say Martha was my first job is me doing a disservice to my actual very first job out of school, which
Yeah.
was at an SAT prep company.
Okay.
And the thing that made that really amazing was, and Ron, I found this time and time again in my career, working for someone who really believed in me.
Mm.
And, I was hired by someone, his name is Frank. And in high school, I had like proctored for him, SAT proctoring. But in his organization, he really believed in me and he gave me so many opportunities to do things that I never would have gotten in a bigger organization. And then when I went to Martha, I started doing the things that I found myself doing throughout my career, which was really trailblazing, doing something new, building things where things didn't exist before, and really pushing boundaries a lot. And that has really taken me and informed where I am today with the advocacy work that I do.
Oh, you mentioned someone in your career who was there for you. You mentioned that person's name. That's important because as we're trying to figure out, because we come out of college, we got a degree, we think it's going to go like this, but someone was there to kind of shepherd, kind of coach you through this process. What's the importance of that role inside of a person's career?
Oh,
That, yeah.
I think it's critical, especially for people who are starting out in their careers. They're young, they're not sure, what path or direction to go in. I certainly didn't know. I never said, I set out to be a licensing expert or a product development expert, or, a brand builder. I really wasn't sure. And having senior role models to look up to who believed in me and saw me as somebody that was smart and driven and like a sponge. Like I always wanted to learn. I remember even at Martha, I always offered to take notes at meetings because I felt like if I could be like, in that room and I could hear what was being discussed, then I would learn so much. And then when when it became my turn to do the presenting, then, I kind of knew what questions were going to be asked.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I think that having people who allow you in that room, having people who take the time out for you, someone else that you and I both know from Martha, Jonathan. I remember he used to run around the office, Ron. Like he didn't have time to go to the bathroom. He was like running from one meeting to the other. But
Yeah.
there were times where I was like navigating something really hard and I was new in my career and I didn't know what to do. And his
Yeah.
door would be open at 6:30 at night and he'd say, "Come in, let's talk. What's going
Oh,
on?" And
wow.
those people are just they've really influenced me, and I try to channel their leadership in the roles that I've had.
Okay. Kind of set a pattern for what that looks like. Jonathan was like that. So we're kind of reminiscing for folks that's listening in of our days. I told Martha was in here in Dubai. I'm going to say it was maybe the November a year ago, and we had dinner. And I said, the fertile ground that we had in that organization, it just produced leaders. When you look at people that left there and going on to other careers, it's just amazing the level of talent that we had. And she gave us the opportunity to just grow. And I see her and I look at her and I talk to her. She's supposed to be on the show. She's been promising me that for a long time, but she's got to come on the show. And but I wanted to tell, and I told her that because you have to create that fertile environment. So as you manage people, specifically people coming out of school, getting into their first job, and trying to understand, you have to have leaders like a Jonathan, whose door is always open, versus the leader
Always.
who says, "My door is always open, but nobody ever goes there because they don't feel there's going to be an ambush." In trying to do that. So you talked about taking notes in a meeting and the writing piece of that. Was that instrumental in learning those skills? And now you're on the precipice of coming out with a book.
I think that the learning, the taking notes, the being in those meetings, that's all part for me of my this like constant desire to try something new, to be a part of something new, to learn, and to I guess in some ways like be prepared for what's next.
Yeah.
So by being in that room, by taking those notes, I found myself being helpful, right? I found myself being memorable. So I wasn't just one of the other entry level people at the organization. I was that level person who, if you needed someone to take good notes, they could take, I could take good notes. So
Yeah.
I became helpful. I became useful to someone else in a different way. And I think about that as I'm even going into this advocacy and the writing work that I'm doing, how can my time, my commitment to this cause, how can it be helpful to other people, right? And so I think that's really the filter that I think about. It's not about me, it's about connecting with like greater
Okay.
humanity, right? In these things that connect us in the
Yeah.
in work and in life.
Yeah. So the so-called bigger picture. What is the role of a manager? I'm gonna send this to Jonathan as this session is over. What is the key role of a manager that would create that environment? So as you've grown your career and you've moved up, although you're on a somewhat sabbatical now, how would you advise managers to fertilize that new level of people coming in? How do I create an imprint for those people?
Ron, the thing for me in my career that has made, some bosses and some managers absolutely amazing and others I may have learned from or, appreciated, but never had the same kind of connection with. It's actually when I really truly feel I can trust them, when I feel that they are actually looking out for me and my career, and that if I tell them something, like, for example, I had two different bosses during two different times in my career where I was actually going through infertility and loss. And in one instance, I felt I could not tell my boss anything, because if
Oh,
I did, it was going to be really used against me, right? It was like, oh, you're trying to have a baby. Like, I don't want to put you on this long-term project. There was a different boss at a different time in my career who really looked out for me. Oh, you're trying to do this? Okay. Like, do you need time off in the morning? Like, how can we adjust your schedule? And it's building it's I want to be that boss that someone can walk into my office knowing that my door is truly open, and also they can trust me to tell me the things that they're struggling with, that they're trying to figure out, without me then judging them, making it harder for them, right? Like, to truly be looking out for your people. And I've had bosses who have done that for me and have been inspirational for me.
okay. Okay. So that kind of imprint, you saw what was instrumental to you as you drove your career, challenges that you had, and you were able to move beyond that. And so leadership is important. So the imprint or the model that you use for developing your people, we have to set a standard.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when someone doesn't have that skill to do that? Do you think of so you talked about Jonathan. Jonathan was there. The X person who was not there. If I brought you in to speak to a leadership development session, how would you discuss, how do you connect with your people? How do you connect to build the relationship you're talking about?
So I think part of it too is showing that you trust them. So I think early on in your career, your instinct is, I need to be the one giving the presentation. I need to be, because it's, I'm in charge. I'm the boss. I got to be doing this, right? But if you can, and I all the time, give the people who are on my team the moment to present, that learning opportunity, that growth opportunity. But you have to know they're not going to do it the way you would do it, right? Or necessarily the way you want it done. They're going to
Yeah.
do it their way, and their way, you can guide them, you can lead them, right? But ultimately, it's knowing that you have to give people those opportunities. You have to let them present in the room. You have to let them come to the meeting with the CEO and actually give the presentation, not just sit in that meeting. And I think that takes, that's how you develop leaders. You give them those opportunities that they might not feel ready for, but that you do your best to prepare them for, because telling them what to do and how to do it, it's not gonna
No.
achieve what you want to achieve. They have to do it themselves, and feel supported as they're doing it.
Mhm. And that creates that environment inside. Someone else on the team sees that and they realize that you're there for them, and it just kind of multiplies, beyond that. Um, the manager you talked about, you couldn't share that, and I know you've grown into now a lot of advocacy work. Give us kind of a highlight on that and how you were able to transition that and use the learnings from the corporate world to drive what you're doing now. I know you have an article now that's posted on Washington Post. You've done a lot of writing in this field. Did the work that you have been doing from the corporate side, was that able to enable you to make a different kind of transformation? You got a new book coming out. Give us.
Yeah, I absolutely, Ron. I think it's the experiences in the corporate world, navigating infertility, navigating stillbirth, navigating my daughter dying, all of these things, navigating them while trying to have a career, grow my career. It taught me so very much about what I wanted to change, and what I have been, what I think about is, sorry, Ron, I'm losing your original question. I feel like I don't want to go off on a tangent for you. Tell me your,
No, No, what I was asking was, how do you transition that from what you've learned and you've gone through issues as it relates to fertility, and now you become an advocate of that?
Hmm.
So what did you bring from the so-called corporate space, the learnings from that, and it pushed you into probably a new career focus?
Yeah, very much.
You've kind
Okay,
of
thank you. Yeah. So I mean, it's connection. It really is connection. It's so being the person in the office that people knew had gone through these things, I remember a very, very kind of moving moment where I was at an organization and this woman came to me and said, "Do you have a minute? Can I talk to you?" And she looked really upset. I said, "Sure." And we went into a conference room and we sat together and she said, I'm having a miscarriage. I said, "Well, what, right now?" She said, "Yeah, right now." And, the way miscarriages often happen is that they go on for multiple days, but she felt she couldn't leave. She had to be at work. She didn't have the vacation days. She, had a big project to do. And so that's just there've been multiple examples along those lines. But what they've taught me is how intertwined our personal lives are with our corporate lives, and how important it is to take the lessons that I've learned about how to change things in the corporate world and how to apply those in society and the outside world, right? So how do you
mm,
influence in a company, right? I remember when I was at Food Network, I wanted to start a line of wine. And my boss was really skeptical, and felt that, Food Network was a food organization. It was a company that, really was all about food and cooking. And I said, "No, wait, hear me out. I grew up in this Italian American family. Wine is on the table just like water. Like, it's part of your meal. It enhances your meal. It's meant to go with food. It's part of the European culture that I think we can teach Americans about." And to his credit, he was like, "Well, put a presentation together. Let's get it in front of the president." And it was communicating that, but it was communicating it in a way that was, what's in it for the president of the network. And it wasn't just about the wine. It was that wine allowed the advertising team to start to sell in a new category that they weren't generating revenue in before. So sure, it's like a project that was interesting and great, but it also really built up this revenue stream for the advertising team. So when I
mm,
think about those lessons in corporate, and now I think about how do I do something similar, to change society, to change the way that we are looking at IVF, to change the way we're looking at access. In a way, it's similar because it's storytelling. It's painting a picture of what could be, right? So it's saying, "Hey, president of Food Network, here's what the future could look like if we do this line of wine." And it's not just about the wine, it's about X, Y, and Z. It's like, hey, here's what the future could look like if anyone could access IVF, not just people who are in big companies with great benefits, not just people who have the money to afford, not just the, doctor's visits, but all the medication. Like, here's what
mm,
the world could look like. And
mm.
so I think it's through that, like, really understanding how to, really thinking about how to tell those stories and how to influence change. And they're parallel in the corporate world, I think, as they can be in society.
So when I told you I always admired your work from afar, this is what I was saying. This is what I was thinking. And
You.
look at that. Because so here's what you learn from things. So how do you, inside of a corporate world, can we make a business case behind that? And you talk about it, painting a picture of what it could be, as my friend Peter Piccinini, who was a former guest, just mentioned as in the comments that a few seconds ago. So if we're learning inside of an organization, how can we take that learning and bring it into the corporate focus? But again, that depends upon the culture. That depends
Hmm.
upon the leader who said, "You know what? Let's try it. I don't get it, but let's put something together and move it forward." Leadership. And this
Hmm.
is what leadership gives people an opportunity to take it forward, to be able to do that. So the question I wanted to ask you is that when you look at the possibly resistance you had, and you had that leader to carry you along and say, "Let's try this." from a person that manages a team of people, what would be the learning from that? So when someone comes to you with an off kilter idea.
Oh, I mean, those are usually the best ideas, Ron. The ideas that people kind of like come into your office early in the morning being like, so last night I was thinking about something like, and it's kind of crazy. Like, it's usually not crazy at all. It's usually
Yeah.
like the seed of the most amazing thing.
Yeah.
And those are the, again, like if I'm in my office early in the morning, it's probably because I'm preparing for something. But, if someone's knocking on my door and asking for my time, I'm going to want to give it to them. Right.
Yeah.
And so, it's funny, back to that wine. We had hired a company to help us name our wine, and we had like paid a lot of money to have this company come in and figure out, like, we didn't want to call it Food Network wine, like what should it be called.
Yeah.
We did
The
like this
consultants,
whole
the
yeah,
consultants.
we spent all this time, all this money. At the end of the day, the names we come up with, like, no one was excited about them at all. And there was this woman on my team who was that woman that I said, come to the meeting, take the notes, be there. The president is there, the general manager is there, like, come to that meeting. She's the one who a few days later came to my office and said, I have this crazy idea I thought about last night. And she named the wine. And it was like the most perfect, most amazing name. It's Entwine. And it was the coming together of entertainment and wine. It was the coming together of, food and wine entwining together in the flavor profile. So again, it's those crazy ideas that you actually want to listen to. And they're not always gonna be the best ideas, but just listening to them, talking them through, giving that person the opportunity to be heard. I think that means so much to people, just being able to be heard and listened to.
Yeah, just being able to be heard, because how many times I did a session this morning with a group out of Singapore, and we were talking through the same thing. And one of the points of a strategic mindset is adaptable, and adaptable means that the solution could come from any place on your team. You spent all this money from all these high-powered people, and they're going through a methodical process. But someone in your team says, "Why couldn't we do?" It wasn't that simple. Why couldn't we do this? Oh my God, the skies opened up and said, "This is it." We wasted all this money. There's no ROI here, and there's someone sitting here through all of it. So when you think of that in leading a team, we bring this out. So you talked about the doors always open, and you create that, because a lot of people that had the idea, they may not have felt comfortable coming in, knocking on the door if the door is closed, or maybe coming in and sharing. I would never go there to share that, because I don't create that. So how do you create an environment in your team that people feel, now it's called psychological safety, that they feel they can come in and say, you know what, I have this crazy idea. And whenever someone tells me that, I said, let me stop, let me put the phone away, because this is going to be groundbreaking for the most part.
Yeah, I love it. Well, there's two things that I think about. And the first is, we're in a world where the physical door isn't always open because we're not always in the same places, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to have a, communication tool that your team is not just hearing from you when there's something urgent, something necessary. I mean, I love Slack. I think it's a great, tool for collaboration. And it's being active all the time. So if there is something that has to be asked, it's not like, oh, why is this person, what is this person, reaching out to me? Like, it's a normal part of conversation. So I think the first is finding that communication tool, because again, the physical door is not open if you're not in the same office. But then I think it's, and this is funny, this is something I use in my corporate life, and I also used it in my fertility journey. And it's establishing this time every week when you are available to your team. And so it can be, you've got direct reports and you always have a weekly meeting. And so they know they can bring anything into that time. But it can also be that, that time, the way that I found success in some of those weekly meetings is actually, I did this at the last company that I was at. I asked my direct reports to answer a series of questions every week. Like, what was the best thing that happened this week? What was the most challenging thing that happened this week? What can I help you with this week? And by starting every meeting with these series of questions, it opens up a conversation rather than jumping in and saying like, oh, let's take a look at that presentation you made. Let's look at this. It starts with this human level of, like, what's the best thing that happened this week? And it doesn't have to be, having to do with the office. Like, oh, we got a dog, let me show you a picture of my dog. Great. But it's creating these moments where it's not awkward or uncomfortable for people to talk to you.
Yeah. Bill Campbell, who was one of the most renowned CEO coaches, well, he's dead now, but one of the structures that he taught to leaders, and he was the number one CEO coach. And he says, always start the meetings with the personal side. Get to know people, get to know what they're interested in.
Yep.
And then once you go through that, then you break down into the business side, because
Definitely.
that level of interaction will to move the organization to a different level. And it's exactly what you were talking about when you talked about, what did you do this week that was interesting? So when I do a leadership development project, which I do a lot of, one of my parts in that proposal is that after the session is over, every week for 6 weeks, I'm gonna send you one question and you have to respond to that. And that question could be, how did you make an impact this week? Who did you have a conversation with that was really enlightening? Because, we go away to training and we go do the 2 to 3 day offsite, but you get back to work happens. There's 1,001 things coming in. Everything's you forget all about that crap.
Yep.
So my thing
absolutely.
I'm going to send you something for 6 weeks.
Yep.
And every Friday, I want you to think about it and respond to it. That's reflection, which was what you were building into. So later on in our careers, we'll talk to someone that said, I work for Lia, and Lia did this. This ain't you mentioned Jonathan, because this is what I learned from that. And this is how we create that imprint. What do you think of that?
I think it's absolutely true. Yeah. And, the thing, I was just thinking, Ron, when you were saying that about the always wanting to, or doing that leadership thing, going away and then like, how do you take it in? Like, life gets so busy. And part of that, one of the things I try to really do all the time is think about my network and try to reconnect with someone, even in like the tiniest way, right? Send them a quick note on a social media app, whatever it is, just that reconnection, because that's just so you remind yourself of, I don't know, your connection with that person, what you did with that person, what you learned. I think connecting with people and, that inspired you is important.
Yeah. So I want to talk through the category of giving back. So you're on sabbatical and you're moving into advocacy work. You've all over. What does that mean to you? Why did you decide that, I need to take some time because I really want to focus on this particular issue, because I dealt with this issue. A lot of people would have dealt with it and they still kept doing what you're doing, what they were doing as it relates to corporate. But you said, what, let me create some impact. What drove that?
So I grew up in an Italian American family that believed in the American dream, right? And it was a family of immigrants that said, I'm going to make life better for my kids than it was for me, right? And so I had the opportunity to go to a good school and get a good job and, be driven in my career. And then I came to this moment where I wasn't able to start a family. And that was so heartbreaking and so challenging. And the same kind of thing applied for me, where I wanted to, I went through this like really, really, really difficult thing to have my daughter. And I didn't want the next generation to have to face what I faced and all the barriers and all the challenges. And I felt so privileged to be where I am today that I also felt it shouldn't be this hard, right? So like if I think back to like my grandparents, it was so hard for them to come to this country and start their life. It was so hard for me to have my daughter, so very hard for so many reasons. And it shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that the company you work for and the healthcare plan you have and how much money you have or what part of the world you live in defines whether or not you get the care you need to start your family. And so it just felt to me that, you know, I've lost 2 children along the way. And it felt to me like there has to be some better good in this. There has to be some purpose that comes out of this pain. And so that's really the driver for me. And I think that you know, I write my story when I can, when people will publish it. You know, I write in different news and media organizations. But writing a book means I can get this story out to a really broad number of people. So that's a really important thing.
The challenge you're going through, and then I'm going to take it out and I'm going to spread it to a wider audience. That's a different mindset from dealing with something and you bottle it up and you keep moving on and it becomes kind of a personal in-house thing. So I always admire people that say, you know what, I'm going to take this beyond me and I'm going to drive it to a different level. If I help 10 people, if I help one person, that's going to be the impact of that. That's an amazing story. So the advocacy work, you know, you become kind of a thought leader as it relates to that. Is the book going to center around that, or is the book going to kind of be a different kind of approach?
The book is very much about the way I have found the most success with advocacy is through storytelling and through sharing my story, because other people see themselves, they see their sisters, they see their best friends, they see people in my story, they find their stories and this connection. But the way the book is structured is it's my story and my path. It actually starts with surgery, fibroid surgery, to help me get pregnant. And it starts with that surgery and it goes through till, you know, welcoming my daughter and all the roller coaster of the ups and downs. But woven throughout is actually, it's a nonfiction story that tells the story of the history of reproductive rights and how, you know, the way that infertility was treated centuries ago actually influences the way that medicine is practiced today. Absolutely. And it's really fascinating to kind of also see history repeating itself. A lot of the advocacy for women's reproductive rights that was, you know, happening in the 1970s, you know, a lot of that is kind of, we're seeing this come full circle now with what's happening in politics. So I think now is a very important time to have a voice and influence change, because it's a time where we really are seeing what we've seen in history kind of come back. And it felt like the right moment to be a part of this conversation and try to be a leader in this conversation. And again, you know, through a book, it's not just my story, it's how the history of reproductive rights and maternal care throughout the ages has influenced where we are today.
So I'm going to kind of step out there for a second. So when you look at your career path and what you've gone through, leaders who were there, understanding from people, the suggestion could come from any place, and then you went through this. Do you think the building blocks were there to say, you know what, I'm at a point, I've gone through 2 situations that did not work, and I'm going to take a step back for a year? That's powerful.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, change and resistance is, I think, a very central theme in my career. I've always been in organizations that I was trailblazing and that I was doing something that was very different from what the organization's like core was. Like even at Martha Stewart, right? I was doing the products, and in the beginning of Kmart, that was really different. That was very unique. You know, I did at Food Network, I built products like that didn't exist before. I kept going into organizations and having these roles where my job was very different. I went to Getty Images, and instead of selling, licensing imagery to media organizations, I was building physical products. So
Okay.
I've always kind of had this job and this role that has put me in a position of kind of swimming upstream and needing to be very kind of scrappy in the work that I do. Even if I was at like a really big organization, I didn't have a lot of resources in my own team, in my own group, where I was. And so being scrappy, learning new things. In my career, I learned, I've created so many different things, from like baby blankets to wine to
Yeah.
candles to, framed artwork, all these different things. And you have to
Yeah.
learn about each of these these
Yeah.
categories. And just like
Yeah.
that, I have to learn, how do you write an op-ed? How do you get an agent? How do you publish a book? How do you get your voice out there? How do you get engaged and involved in advocacy? You don't just get involved. You have to find the organizations that you can be a part of. And finding partnerships was such a big part of my career. Finding these organizations that I can help serve has been a really critical part of advocacy.
Yeah. The reason I'm in a suit today, for people that are listening, I did a presentation to a digital marketing executive group. And one of the things I talked about was kind of what you're talking about: create an environment so your people feel free to grow and they
Mm-hmm.
feel free to share ideas and all these kinds of things. And I accepted that, and I knew I was going to be running late to get back here to log in. But I said, every opportunity that I have, and I can speak to this so-called CEO's level, I want to tell them, stop it, and give your workers an opportunity to grow. Because if you're not listening to them, you can think you have all the strategy in the world, and you're going to find out later in that trajectory of that strategic initiative that you're missing something. The missing piece is going to be people.
Yeah.
And this is
People.
why anytime I get the opportunity to do that, I want to share that with I call it the people upstairs. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true for your people. It's very true for your partners, right? Like when you're going out and you want to achieve something and you're looking for new partners, it's not just, here's what I want to do it with me. It's, here's what I want to do, and here's how it's going to benefit you. Here's how your organization, here's how I think I can benefit your organization. But what are you really trying to do, potential partner? And how can we create this partnership that is like, when we come together, we rise together. So,
Mm.
So much of that is true in business and true in the advocacy world as well.
If you could go back and talk to Lia coming out of university, and I'm all excited, I'm going to get this job, and I'm going to go here, 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 and I'm going to end it here. What advice would you give them besides just calm down?
So I think, honestly, building your network early on is really important, and taking the opportunities to learn in different ways. I, anytime you can, it's not just about getting that internship, right? Which so many people are like, oh, I can't get that internship I want. Okay, you can't get the internship, but is there a podcast you can listen to? Is there, a seminar? Is there, there are things that you can do to get yourself exposed to the career that you're interested in. Speak, listen to someone speak from the company. But I think as a early grad, I would tell myself to slow down. I was, moving a million miles an hour. I still have to tell myself to slow down.
Yeah.
That is a big thing. And,
Even today, even today, sometimes.
even today. Yep.
No.
And, take the time really to celebrate your wins too. I think that so often, I'm always trying to figure out what's next, that you don't stop and say, wow, like, gosh, if I really look at what just happened over the last, 6 months or year, like, this is really great. And so I think I would tell my younger self to, enjoy the journey, learn from the journey, and also create as many connections as I can, as many human connections as I can, because it's those connections and that network that I really do keep going back to. And it's not just, there's the people on LinkedIn. You look at your LinkedIn, you're like, who is that? When did I connect with them? Like, when did I know that? When did I meet them? It's more the people that you look at them and you're like, wow.
I thought it was just me.
It's not just you. I know. If LinkedIn is listening, Ron, I actually think that they need a little, when you connect with someone, you need to be able to write a personal note. Like, this is how I know this person and connected with them. So if LinkedIn is listening, that's what they really need. But the thing is, you look at some of those connections and you think back to these times you had together, these things you went through together, and making yourself memorable with other people. And I think I would have maybe been more intentional about relationships and networking earlier on, because as my career has continued, it's really served me as something that's been really important.
Mm-hmm. So when you look back over the body of work that you've done, and you're still growing and moving beyond this, when you look back on the body of work that you've started since university, what would you say was the pivotal moment that you either learned something or you knew you had to make a directional change or whatever it was? Can you point out one or maybe two?
Ron, I think it's a theme. I think it's there have been several times in my career where I have been laid off, and it has been such a kind of heartbreaking moment, because I've been at organizations where I have put my heart and soul into building something and making something bigger and broader. And then usually the company is now headed in a different strategic direction. And what I did was always, kind of ancillary to the main business. And so the entire group, the entire organization that I was a part of has then gone away. And that has been such a moment of, it's such a low point and a high point at the same time. It's this low point of, everything I built and worked for, like, what, this is going away. Like, it's so heartbreaking, but at the same time, you don't see it in that very moment, but when you look back, you realized it set me on a different course. It set me somewhere new. It set me to learn something new and seek out a new direction. And I think those changes have been really, really powerful. Even at the time, they didn't feel that way. I can look back and say those are the moments that really shaped me.
Yeah. When I look back on mine, my number one was when I left Martha, and I didn't have a job, but I just was kind of fed up. And there was some other situation that went along with that. And people said, you're going to leave. You were the vice president, and you're going to leave, and I'll figure it out. Best decision ever.
That's great. Yeah.
Sometimes you face this crossroad, but I always come back to, from my side, you have to trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I may not see the exact roadmap, but I said, you know what? I'm going to trust me. And there were some times that I said, dumbest idea ever. But when I look back on it now, I travel the world and do what I do. And so thank you for your interpretation, of that. So what do you, this 1 year, what does Lia's career look like post 1 year? You get the book out. Is it kind of a different direction? Is it back to court? What are you thinking now? What are you excited about the future?
That's such a good question, Ron. Tell me, can you ask me this a year from now? So I think advocacy has been a part of what I do, like, since 2019. It's always been something I've been doing on the side. So it's not going to go away. It's not going to, change. I think for me, being a part of this conversation, being more embedded in the conversation is really critical. So the book will, come out, and I hope that it creates opportunities for me to speak on this topic, converse on this topic, meet others on this topic. That is all really, really important and really, really critical. at the end of the day, I will go back and do something in, the business world. It's just, it's hard for me to stay away from, the corporate world. It's also honestly hard, like, not to have that, steady income, all of that. So it'll be a mix. I think my world will be a mix.
Yeah. But, to give you some insight, the speaker circuit pays well.
I love it.
It pays well, and you're treated like a king when you walk in the room. So I believe that can be a side conversation.
I love it.
Looking at that. So when is the book coming out? When will the book be out? Or
we don't know yet. It'll be a while. It's being they call it out on submission. It's being shopped around to publishing houses now through my agent, Stacy Glick.
Okay. Cool. Well, you know what? We're coming up on the end of the show, and one of the reasons that we decided to do this show, a day who you met earlier, was to try and get inside of people's heads as they navigated to where they are today. And we have the most interesting people. Last week, we had a surgeon on who says, I don't want to do surgery anymore. I want to have a different impact. So when you hear those kind of things, that's why I say we're so unique. So the platform was about creating a platform for engaging leaders, and as they could talk through what they've gone through, and hopefully the audience can learn from that. So today you brought out the full package, which I knew anyway this was going to happen. I knew this way ahead of time. I'm kind of looking into the crystal ball. I said, yeah, we need to talk about this. So thank you for being a guest. Is there any insights you would want to share with the people who are tuning in?
I gotta say, Ron, you make this look easy. You sit here and have the most natural conversations with people. But I also just want to recognize that there's so much that goes on behind the scenes for you when you do this. And it's just, for me, it's awesome to see you following your passion. And it really shows in everything you're doing. So I just want to thank you for doing this, for putting, these stories out there, and for having me on today. It's been fantastic. Truly. Thank you.
Okay. So you're looking at a kind of a finished product. It wasn't this easy beginning in the starting phase of it.
Right.
So when you talk about growth, you said, well, I'm thinking about writing something, and you did an article here, and now you're writing a book. So it's the same thing on your side.
Yes.
So now when I ask that question, I don't want me.
Well, now it looks easy, Ron. I'm coming in on the looking easy part. So kudos. You got there.
It was a pleasure for me to have you. As I said, I've always been a big fan when we worked in the same organization. I told Martha when she and I had dinner that night, I said, you have no idea the number of people that you gave the opportunity to grow and have blossomed into all kinds of things. So I wanted to put that in as a pitch.
True.
When I send her the link to this, and I'm going to say, you told me a year ago you're going to be on this show. So that's going to be my big get.
It's time, Martha. It's time.
Martha. Come on the show.
Jonathan,
I'm going to send you a link. All of our workmates, I posted this in the alumni site for everyone to kind of tune in. But it's about sharing success of people. So we say success, it looks that way, success, but there's a lot of underpinnings of that. Some days you're looking at the ceiling and the ceiling says, oh my God, I'm dealing with so many issues, but that's life. So thank you. We're going to close. Thank you. We're going to close out, but I need you to hang on for a minute as we close out. I'll go through it after we close out. So thank you so much for being a guest. And people that are listening in, share this video. We need likes. We need to grow our base. We're like, I think 12 to 15,000 people. Our goal is to get to 50,000 people that's listening in. So be sure to do that. So thank you so much for being a guest. Hang on.
Take the CEO series with you anywhere, anytime. All episodes are now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership.